Welcome back to my YouTube series where I teach all of the items covered in the Palo Alto Networks Certified Next Generation Firewall Engineer certification. Today I have reached the section 1.4 on routing of the Next Generation Firewall Engineer. And this section has a lot. It actually has like 4 subsections with all the dynamic protocols, the advanced routing engine, etc. And I thought about breaking it up into multiple lessons. But then I remembered that actually when I was helping write a different exam, I had proposed a question. I won't say what the question was, of course. And it was something that was kind of technology that the firewall leverages, but that's not specific to Palo Alto Networks. And actually the certification team pushed back on me because they wanted the questions to all be specific to Palo Alto Networks. So I realized that within this lesson, I really shouldn't be spending a bunch of time teaching you all things like what is border gateway protocol, how does that work, etc. And really I should be focusing on what things are specific to the implementation within the next generation firewall by Palo Alto Networks. So that's what I'm going to do today, and I'm just going to have this in a single lesson. If you're not really that familiar with dynamic routing, if you're more of a security person who understands the basics of routing, but maybe haven't dug super deeply into different routing protocols and how they advertise routes to one another, etc. You have a few options. 1, you can learn those things, of course. 2, you can do your best, learn the things that I explained today that are specific to Palo Alto Networks, and then try to just learn all the other things really well, and know that you might get some of those questions wrong on the certification exam. And then, of course, your third option is to consider whether or not you want to be more you're thinking more of along the lines of a next generation firewall engineer, which is this certification. And this is more on people who are setting up and managing the firewalls from like a firewall administrator type perspective or a network security analyst. So that's that other certification, the Palo Alto Network Certified Network Security Analyst, which also covers firewall capabilities, but that's much more administering the firewall from a security policy perspective. So that would be things like configuring security policies and objects, etc., within the firewall. So just something to think about if you're not a big routing person, kind of what direction that you want to go. But without further ado, let's get into routing in the Palo Alto Networks Next Generation Firewall. All right, there are 4 subsections to this section on routing in the Palo Alto Networks Firewall. Those are going to be the dynamic routing protocols, then the redistribution, then it's going to be route monitoring, and then finally, the 4th thing will be the advanced routing engine. Before we get into all that, I want to just cover the basics of how routing works within the Palo Alto Networks Firewall. Just make sure we're kind of all on the same page as far as how virtual routers and when we talk about logical routers, how those work. So let me just jump right into it by opening up my firewall. Again, this is in Amazon Web Services. So this is kind of just the firewall I set up. You can do the same thing if you want to play with the firewall. And I know somebody did ask for a video on how to set that up, so I will do that. Speaking of which, it's 9:37 p.m. and I have to wake up at like 5:45 tomorrow for work. So for those of you who said, "Hey, release the next video as quickly as possible," I am doing that. So, thanks for the feedback. Please keep giving it. It actually does motivate me. But yeah, I just want you to know that I care. All right, I'm in the firewall dashboard. The routing is all going to be configured in network. Virtual routers. You see there is a router that exists here called default. You'll never guess this, but that router is there by default. All right, we'll dig into that. First, I'm going to go back to interfaces. So if you remember from the first lesson, if you want interfaces to be able to route, they need to be layer 3 interfaces. So I've already configured here 2 layer 3 interfaces. I've 1.1 is going to be the internet interface, and 1.2 will be the internal interface. So we'll just kind of use that as a basis for showing everything else. Now, if I click in these interfaces, you'll see that Neither of them is assigned to a virtual router yet. So just as you want to assign an interface to a security zone, as we discussed in lesson 2 on zones, you would want to assign them to a virtual router as well if you want them to be able to route. So if you're going to have a layer 3 interface, 1.1, and you want things that come in on one packets that come in on 1.1 to be able to go out, say 1.2, and vice versa, then you want to be able to route between those. And so you're going to need to attach them to a virtual router in order to do that. Let's just attach them to the default router right now. So I'll attach the first one. So you can see I attach 1.1 to the default virtual router here. Another way to attach them is you can actually just go into the router. And if I hit the default router, I can actually add it right here. So now you can see I can add one too. And if I go back to the interface, you'll see it's now attached, right? 1.2 is attached. So again, very basic, just making sure we're all on the same page. All right, so now these two things are attached, right? So packets coming in 1.1 can go out 1.2, vice versa. Once you set it up, not by default. So you see here we have the administrative distance. So just kind of, again, just the basics. So the way that the Palo Alto Firewall is going to decide which route to choose is it's going to say, okay, first, longest prefix, then second, lowest administrative distance, and then third is going to be the help me out here, metric, right? Third is going to be metric, which I believe the same thing in Cisco routing, right? So longest prefix, then administrative distance, and then metric. These are the defaults for the administrative distances for different protocols. We'll get into those protocols in a minute. First, I will cover static routes. I know that's the first section is on dynamic routing protocols. You're like, Wes, why are you covering static routes? I just know that some of you might be new to Palo Alto Networks firewalls. You might just be taking this class to learn, or because your organization's migrating to Palo Alto firewalls, and you might need to use static routes. So I've actually seen tons of organizations like they just use static routes. They just say, hey, internal, this is my IP space. I'll let all the I'll let my routers internally handle all the routing, and external is that everything else. Just go to my default router from my default gateway for my ISP, and then just send it off to the internet service provider, and that goes to the internet, right? So I've seen that before. In that case, you might be wondering like why use routing at all, and in some cases it's due to they want to assign an IP address to that interface so that then they can they can do like internal global protect gateway or something like that. So there are still reasons why you might want to do that, but even if you're not taking advantage of the routing. But there's a lot of great routing capabilities here. So let's just look at static routes, the simplest. Let's just set up a basic one. I didn't actually, yeah, that's fine. I'll just do none, but let's say, so you say we want to do internet routing, then for destination, so you would put 0/0.0.0/0, and then interface, I think 1.1 was the one I made internet. So you can do IP address if you have like a gateway that you were given. Yeah, I mean I could do like 192.168.0.1 or something like that. Say that was the gateway, so you could do that. For example, you can add an admin distance here, and that will override the static admin distance if you want to make a unique admin distance for that specific route, and then same thing with a metric. Okay, so and we'll talk about BFD a little bit later as well as path monitoring. All right, so that would be simple static route. Then for internal route, so we say internal, and then say like it's 192.168.1.0. So say this is your internal subnet. If you're like, hey Wesley, I don't know what those numbers and dots and stuff mean, that's outside the scope of this course. You have to go take a Net Plus class or something like that. And then you select 1.2, that would be the internal one. Next hop. So for this one, for example, right, if it's all if it's all in the same subnet, you can just put next hop none, because it can just communicate via switching, right? It doesn't need to have a next hop, right? So then you can just do that and hit okay. This kind of setup I've actually seen like quite a bit, very common. They just do this, they're done. That's their whole routing interface. And then of course there's IPv6 if you want to configure that separately. But again, the curriculum calls for dynamic routing protocols. So let's look at some of those. These are the 4 that are available. It's going to be routing information protocol, open shortest path first, open shortest path first v3 for using IPv6, and border gateway protocol. If you want to use routing information protocol, I actually haven't seen this in the wild in a long time, but if you're using it, you would add your interface that is going to be advertising routes via routing information protocol. That's internal. You add your auth profile. Your auth profile, you can just you can just add it right here, and then you can add the password or the MD5 hash right here with the key ID and keys. You can select your mode, normal, passive, or send only, and then you can select BFD, which again we'll cover in a second. So that's it. And then OSPF will look very similar. I mean, it looks almost exactly the same, right? The only difference is you're going to have this router ID. One thing I will highlight here on all of these is you're going to have this reject default route selected by default. So reject default by default, if that makes any sense. And yeah, so that's going to be selected by default. And then OSPF, instead of adding interface, you're going to be adding an area ID, and then you add your interface here, right? You'll add all these things. If you don't know what these things are, you want to learn more about OSPF, then I recommend doing an OSPF lesson. If you want me to teach routing, if you want me to teach like basics of routing, like what is OSPF and how does it work and what do all these things mean, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to teach that. But yeah, and then you can configure BFD here. So another thing that's important to know is that BFD, bidirectional forwarding detection, can be configured here, and this is for all of these, right? So you see here BFD, here BFD, here BFD, here BFD, right? So it can be configured globally for that protocol. You can configure a BFD profile. So if we make a new BFD profile, and we call it what are we going to call it? So say we call it global RIP. All right, then that's the global one. But if you want to add an interface, like we did 1.2, and then you said, hey, for this specific interface, I want to have internal RIP. I want to have a different profile, and just ignore the fact that I put the same settings for those. Then you can do that, right? And it'll use this one instead of the global one. However, by default, it's just going to inherit the global, in which case it's just going to use this global one. And that's the same for all of these dynamic protocols. All right, OSPF, same thing. OSPF v3, now you're going to do all the same things, just make sure that you're using IPv6. All right, BGP. For BGP, I did want to cover just show you the peer groups, just to make sure you know how that works. So you would create a peer group here, and then name the peer group. You would select IBGP or eBGP, IBGP, eBGP. So you got to be able to say that fast, I guess. Not me, but select all these settings, and then this is where you're going to select that interface. So the local interface, since I didn't put IPs on these interfaces, there's going to be none here, and then the peer, you're going to put the peer IP or fully qualified domain name if you're not using IPs. Maybe you're using a fully qualified domain name to determine where that is, if it changes or something, or maybe you just like fully qualified domain names. That's fine. You want to use DNS to resolve the IP. That's fine. And you can put the new address. Can I just type in an address? I was like 192.168.3.1. Would that work? Yeah, looks like it works. What doesn't it like? Oh, it doesn't have a name. Demo BGP. Yeah. That's it. I'm not gonna explain what all these things are. I did BFD though. Did want you to see that. All right, BFD. Again, you can inherit by default. You can select one of these. You can make a new one, etc. All right, that is the basics of configuring these protocols. Again, you need to know that there's these 4 protocols. You need to know, if you want to be able to configure them, you need to know where to be able to configure these interfaces. the auth profiles for RIP and OSPF, the peer groups and peers for BGP. If you really, really interested in routing, you can dig into all this. And if you want a lesson on the deep topics of like, you're like, hey Wes, like I see peer group. What does it mean to import the next hop from the original or use peer? What does it mean? Like what is an open delay time? Like what is that? All right, then that'll have to be another lesson. I'm not gonna. There's so many different options here. I'm not gonna get into those. I'm gonna keep it on the most important things. Now, what I mentioned. One thing that's important to remember is that just because you are learning routes from one, from on one interface, from BGP on one interface. Say you have a BGP peer and you're learning those BGP routes. Okay, like how do you know that those are getting advertised internally? That's when you have to do redistribution. That's what redistribution is for. I actually had this happen with a customer that, this is something I've been learning in consulting, is not to assume, right? And so I assumed that they had redistribution set up, and we could see that OSPF was working. The routes were getting advertised, but we couldn't. But it wasn't. It wasn't. Nothing was routing there, and so we could see. We see the traffic was going, and it was connected. The OSPF was working properly, and we're just like, what is going on? Well, those OSPF routes that were getting learned on that interface were not getting advertised on the other interface, and that's because we didn't configure redistribution. So you need to do that. So to configure redistribution, you're going to have to determine if the routes are IPv4, IPv6. You're going to create the redistribution profile. If you're learning them from BGP, for example, then you're going to select BGP. So and you can select multiple, right? So say like on Ethernet 1, maybe you're learning BGP, but you're also learning OSPF or something, right? Or you're learning static routes as well. Then that's fine. But yeah, so say you're learning, and then you can add the filters here. BGP filter pops up, right? So you can filter for specific communities or extended communities. That's not going to go away now. All right, and then you have to name it. So let's just say internet BGP routes, and then give it a priority. Oh my gosh, it doesn't like the internet BGP. Let's just call it internet BGP. Good enough. All right, cool. And priority, just like with high availability, lower priority, lower number is higher priority. So if I do priority of 1 for this redistribution, I create another redistribution profile that's 2. It's gonna give precedence to the one that's 1 instead of the one that's 2, because 1 is a lower number. You also, if you want to redistribute, make sure that you check redistribute here and not no to redistribute. No to redistribute serves more like a block list. So if there's specific things that you want to not redistribute, you're like, hey, these are the specific routes that I'm learning. On this one, say like I'm learning, OSPF routes over here. I actually don't want to redistribute those. Over here, you can do a no to redistribute rule profile. All right, so then hit OK. And then now, if I go to OSPF and say I have, I didn't actually configure one, but let's do one, just do, no, wants me to do like a real area ID. Why are you being difficult? All right, it's going to be difficult. Can I just do RIP? I'm going to do RIP. That's easier. All right. Oh, I already did RIP here. Why am I making myself lie? Why am I making something? All right. So I'm going to go to RIP. And then if I go to export rules, now I can just select that redistribution profile. And now, say I have 1, 2 on RIP here. It will now advertise via RIP the routes that were learned from BGP. And you won't run into that issue that I ran into. And you can do the same thing with OSPF, etc. I'm not going to do that because it doesn't like my area IDs. All right, so that's redistribution in a nutshell. That's how it works. You do the same thing in the other direction, right? So if I want to do RIP, let's make this easy. So local RIP. This is like 10. Redistribute. We'll give this interface 2. Cool. Then now if we go to BGP, we go to redistribution rules. and then local RIP, and then now we can advertise these routes learned via RIP to BGP on interface Y, which I didn't actually configure it. Why didn't I actually like save it? Because I'm a loser. Oh, well, shouldn't have mattered, right? Oh, because I just didn't want to put a peer address. I could have just put something, right? Name dat peer. There we go. All right, cool. This is really just for fun. The peer group. You guys are probably like, man, this guy's explained everything. Why is he showing stuff? I don't know. I'm just bored. All right, cool. Now, these routes learned via RIP can be advertised via eBGP on interface 1. Woohoo! We did it, right? You got to do that. If you're learning routes here, want to advertise them over here via a different protocol, you're going to have to configure redistribution. That's what it is. It's like, it's taking these routes and distributing them somewhere else. All right. Cool. We are onward and upward to part 3, which is going to be route monitoring. Let me talk about static route monitoring first. So let's say, for example, that we have, let's hit OK here. Let's actually configure, what isn't it like? Okay, yeah, it doesn't like my BGP. That's why I didn't want to configure it in the first place. But all right, so let's say, for example, let's go back to interface. Let's say, I configure another ISP here on 1.3. So layer 3, we'll say it's also going to be internet, and it's also going to be virtual router, right? And say that's connected to another ISP. So say, since Verizon had an outage recently, I'll say 1.1 is connected to Verizon, and 1.3 is connected to AT&T, right? This is my backup ISP in case Verizon goes out, has an outage. So I'll go to virtual routers, and then default, and now in static routes, so if you see here, this internet routing has a metric of 10, and I can add now path monitoring, and I can say, hey, I want to, oh, I should have added, here, let me add an IP address for this as well. And go back to internet 1.1, let's add an IP address. We just make it whatever. 192.168. We were doing it 0.254. All right, let's just say that. Is it gonna make me do a CIDR? Do you say CIDR or CEDR? Put that in the comments. CIDR or CEDR? I want to know what the community thinks the right answer is. All right. Cool. So now, go to my static route, go here, path monitoring, source IP, pops up. We're going to say, we'll say, internet, what is that called? Google DNS, right? We'll ping Google DNS. We'll make an IP address, 8.8.8.8. And now it's going to ping Google DNS every 3 seconds for 5 times. And if it fails 5 times, trying to ping every 3 seconds, it's going to get rid of this route. So say it's all. So, say it's all because you're just like, hey, Google DNS sometimes doesn't work. And then you say, like, is this Cloudflare? Is that, I think, Cloudflare? Is that 1.1.1.1? I think it's Cloudflare. Oh, 1.1.1.1.1. I guess it would have had to be this one. Oh, no, yeah, same IP. Same thing. All right, so say, like, it's, we can't reach Cloudflare or Google DNS. We've sent 5 pings every 3 seconds. None of them get there. It's going to say this route failed, doesn't exist. So what I can do is I can add another route. So say backup internet. Say 0.0.0.0/0, and then we'll add the interface of 1.3 because that's my backup internet. 192.1, 192.168. It's fine. We'll say 0.0.1. Let's say, and then we'll make the metric higher, right? So we'll make the metric higher. We'll make it, what's the range? Let's give a range. Oh, maybe this question mark over here. Oh, 65535. So we'll, oh yeah, it's right there. Well, let's just make it 1,000, right? So the metric is significantly higher. So now what's going to happen is, if this lower, it's going to prefer this lower metric, right? So again, longest prefix match, then administrative distance, and then metric, right? So these are going to have the same administrative distance. They're going to have the same prefix match, since it's 0000/0. And then they're going to have different metrics, right? So it's going to prefer this one over this one. So it's going to by default use this one. However, if this route fails because of the path monitoring, then it will now use this one, if that makes sense. So now this one will basically take over. That is what path monitoring is, and that's how you can monitor routes. The other way to monitor routes is something that we saw a lot, which was BFD. So BFD is going to send hello messages, right? So it's bidirectional forwarding detection, and so it's going to send hello messages. You have to set up BFD on both sides, and just send hello messages back to each other, and they're gonna, it's basically gonna say like, "Are you up? Are you up?" Like I think I said this with HA, right? They text you at 2 a.m. saying you up, right? So they talk to each other, and it's kind of similar to HA, right? It's just saying like just checking that each side is up, and then it's another way. So you can add that BFD profile. You can just make it default, and I'll show you where the BFD profiles are configured. Yeah, you can make it default, and then now BFD will also work here, where if this BFD fails, so you could even undo path monitoring if you have a router on the other end with BFD enabled, and then now they're going to check in on each other, and if this fails, then it will the other route will take over. And what's great about BFD is you can use it on these dynamic protocols as well. And there is a global, which I may have mentioned this already, there's a global BFD setting for that protocol. And then there is, you can, for each interface in RIP, for example, you can either inherit the, yeah, we did do this already. You can inherit, or you can select the individual one. And you can do that across every single one. Global for OSPF, or when you set up your area, where is it here? You can select another BFD protocol, and so on. Same thing with OSPF v3, same thing with BGP, and that's it. All right. So you can set up BFD. Now, I'll show you. So if you want to configure your own BFD profile, I'm not going to get into the details of how to configure a BFD profile and what all goes into it, but you would go to network profiles, BFD profile, configure your own BFD profile, set these settings. If you want to hear more about, if you want to learn more about BFD, let me know. I'll make a whole lesson just on BFD. But you can set these settings, which have to do with basically the intervals associated with the hello message. Is very similar to HA, right? You have these intervals and things. So kind of like how long, what is your risk tolerance for how long you're willing to allow this connection not to be up before you want the backup route to take over. So that's what BFD is, and it's great because it kind of just gives you that ability to do like the high availability, and so you can connect it on both your firewall and the other side, so that those routes fail, and then routes that are lower priority, even though the priority number is higher or the metric is higher or the administrative distance higher, whatever, are going to take over and be the active routes. All right, that's a lot, but we have now covered route monitoring. So if you're kind of following along with all this, you're like, hey, I understand what these things are, then you're cooking, you're doing great, you're going to crush this part of the certification. So now let's talk about the advanced routing engine. Some of you might have seen this virtual routers thing. You're like, Wes, actually the new thing is logical routers. Why aren't you talking about logical routers? Okay, this is the part where I'm going to talk about it. So logical routers are part of the advanced routing engine, and advanced routing engine is actually required if you want to use Strata Cloud Manager. I had to migrate migrate some of my firewalls to the advanced routing engine so that I could use Strategic Cloud Manager. And suddenly my virtual routers were now called logical routers. This was a while ago, but I just remember it was like, what happened? When did this name change? I kind of thought I was going crazy. I was like, I thought it was called virtual routers the whole time, and it was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first connect to my VPN. I am using a tool now to connect to my VPN, and since I'm traveling right now, I need to use this tool. So I'm using a tool called Vesper. Nope, that's not it. Using a tool called Vesper to connect to my VPN. And yeah, it already has me logged in. So yeah, basically I have to log in with my with my credentials, in this case my Microsoft credentials, and then it will log the IP that I'm coming from. I have to select if it's permanent or temporary. I'm in temporary. This is a hotel, right? So, well, now you know I'm in a hotel. All right. All right, and then now I'm all set. So it'll it'll now allow me to access the VPN. Sometimes it works very quickly. Sometimes it's a little slower. I probably should have done that before. Let me do some movie magic and wait 5 minutes. So we'll wait 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and I will log into the VPN and show you the logical router. Ready, go. All right, thanks for waiting 5 minutes with me. I've been using that tool Vesper lately to protect my VPN access. I wrote an article recently. You can check it out on my Medium page. I'll put it in the description below about how basically geo-blocking just doesn't really work that well, because adversaries I found out are using these things called operational relay boxes, and they can actually basically, like, my VPN located in the US, and basically they can access my VPN from operational relay boxes that they own within the US. So geo-blocking is not really sufficient, and I really want to protect my VPN. I don't really want it to be exposed to the world, so the Vesper tool helps me lock it down. I'll make a video about Vesper later, and once we cover Global Protect in the next lesson, I'll cover it as well. But that is not what we're here to talk about. I just wanted you guys to know, like, what is this guy talking about? He has to wait 5 minutes to connect to his VPN. Like, it's kind of a new thing. So I have talked enough about that. Let me go connect to Global Protect here. So I will hit connect. Okay, cool. I'm connected. So now I can go to all right. And this is the firewall. I have this firewall behind the VPN that has the logical routers and the advanced routing engine. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about how it's different, just so you can kind of understand the basics of the advanced routing engine, and then that will be our whole lesson for today. And we'll talk about Global Protect in the next lesson. So just need this to load. Cool. All right, so just as with the the regular routing engine, what is non-advanced? The old legacy routing engine, let's say that. You're going to go to network, and you'll go to, so now you're going to see there's logical routers, and you can see a couple of logical routers here that I've set up. You've probably seen these before in other demo videos that I've done. And if we go to like this one, you'll see here now, like in OSPF, remember in the previous one, there were like all these options. Now it's going to be, less options, right? And there's, now we've got rip v2 as well. And then you're going to, then you're going to actually have to set up a routing profile. So let me kind of show this. We've got, now BFD is up here under a routing profile instead of under the network profiles. So we've got that as well. So you've got it's the same options for BFD, so that's not an issue. But like for OSPF, so now like if you remember we had those like interface auth profiles, you configure that in OSPF directly. Now you have to configure a profile, interface auth profile. So you just say like test, you have like password, right, and then hit OK. So now when I go to OSPF, here, let's say I configure OSPF, and then we go to authentication. Now we're going to select that profile. So you see that's how it's different. So you're not configuring authentication directly in OSPF. Now you've got to go configure a profile and then add that profile to OSPF. It's definitely, this is very well catered towards like larger enterprises. So the reason that Palo kind of went to this, I was actually in a meeting where the product manager for Advanced Routing Engine was in there, and I was kind of curious, like what are we doing? Like to me, I mean, it's like as just kind of an onlooker, I was just kind of like, okay, like you're just moving things out of here and you're putting them in the profiles. Like what's the big deal, right? Well, the big deal is that this is actually much easier to manage if you're really trying to use a firewall as kind of a more complex router where you're going to have like, OSPF here, and here, but you need a certain authentication profile that you can push across different interfaces. So now these profiles are kind of more scalable. So this is much better for kind of like a larger scale enterprise where you're really trying to use your Palo as your Palo firewall as a router, to take advantage of, to really be more of a router. And so it's kind of funny because I remember when I first got to Palo, people would ask, can I use the firewall as a router? And we would, kind of just see how big their environment was. If it was smaller, we would say like, yeah, you could. And then, yeah, it would be fine, maybe. And some people would do it because they had to have a firewall for security reasons. And for smaller environments, there was no need to spend a bunch of money on, an overkill router. And then, and then some people would have these huge environments. And be like, no, like probably go get a router from a routing company. But Palo's trying to move past that, and that's the whole purpose of the Advanced Routing Engine. And so the idea is that by having profiles, and then now you can apply kind of more seamlessly across different routers and different interfaces, then it's easier to manage that way. So that's the purpose of this Advanced Routing Engine. It's very kind of like profiles. So just think like logical routers. Important thing to know, right? Logical routers are replacing virtual routers. And also, you don't see this here because the way I updated it, you see the logical routers already. But by default, that default router actually doesn't exist anymore. So you're going to have to actually configure one logical router if you have Advanced Routing Engine just out of the box. Logical routers are maintaining the routing information base separate and keeping those routes isolated. But really, the big differentiator here is going to be these profiles here, right? So these profiles, like, this authentication profiles, timer profiles, these other things that are specific to BGP, redistribution profiles, right? So we talked about redistribution, right? The redistribution profile is now something you're going to have to maintain within the routing profiles, and then add those to the router. So like if we go here, we go to BGP, and then we do redistribution. So now you have to select the redistribution profile, right? Similar to, so remember last time the redistribution profile was here in, right? It was here in the router, and then we just added it. Now it's in these profiles here. So you've got to go to BGP, make a BGP make a BGP redistribution profile, build a route map, the source protocol, see all this stuff. Honestly, like, this is a bit more complicated, but also it scales better. So now you've got these profiles that now you can use across different routers, different interfaces, etc. So it's kind of a big change to Advanced Routing Engine. That's what Advanced Routing Engine is. Definitely important to know. I recommend you check that out. So those are the 4 things. You need to know your dynamic routing protocols, at least the basics of how to set those up, whether it's going to be RIP, BGP, OSPF, OSPF v3. You're going to need to know your I don't remember if redistribution I think was first. So no redistribution. You need to configure redistribution profile. If that's a virtual router, you do it in the router itself, and then you're going to need to select the source that you're learning from, and then in the other protocol, you're going to need to select that redistribution, so it knows that, hey, if I'm learning these from OSPF, I need to redistribute these to BGP, right? So you need to configure those, and then so that's the second thing. The third thing is you need to know these path monitoring, route monitoring. So 2 things you're going to have for static routes. You have route monitoring where you can do some pings, but very, very common is going to be BFD. So definitely just at least understand where BFD is configured, right? So you can do global per routing protocol, or you can do sort of per interface, per area, per peer. Yes, per peer, right? Depending on whether it's so interface for RIP, area for OSPF, and peer for BGP, right? And then it's going to by default inherit that global one for that protocol. And if you want it to be different, you're going to have to configure it separately. And then the 4th thing is just kind of know some of the basics of what's unique about Advanced Routing Engine. So really it's going to be now logical routers are replacing virtual routers. And then now you have a lot more stuff in profiles. So you have to kind of understand like what things are we now configuring in profiles, and those profiles have to be added, right? So those are kind of the key things to know. Just keep those in your mind as you're preparing. And those are the things that I would definitely recommend knowing going into this as you go into your certification prep. I hope that you found this video interesting and helpful. This is like I mentioned in the intro, this is a very, very deep topic. I could spend 30 hours. I can make a 30-hour video on this. I mean, you saw how complicated, right, some of these configurations were. So if there's anything in here that you're just like, hey Wes, like you went too quickly through this, I didn't really understand this, I want to learn more about BFD, like what is BFD and what are all these things, but please put that in the comments. Let me know. I'm more than happy to make a more in-depth video and help you all out. But really your feedback is super duper helpful. I appreciate the comments, people saying like, hey, make these things faster, let us know. That's why I'm up at now 10:21 p.m. making this video for you guys, so that I can help you prepare, and hopefully you find this one entertaining but also helpful as you prepare for your certification. And next lesson we will be talking about Global Protect. That is one of my favorite topics, and that one will be a lot more, be less like walkthrough. I'm gonna actually go in and I will set up Global Protect from scratch in that one, so that you guys can kind of see like everything within setting up Global Protect. So please stay tuned for that one. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully this is helping you all prepare for your next generation firewall engineer, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.